Think about the last time you were embarrassed. Not the memory of embarrassment, but the feeling itself. The heat that rises in the face. The sudden wish to be somewhere else. To be someone else. To have the moment unmade. The acute awareness that other people are watching. That they have seen something. That what they have seen has changed how they see you. The specific agony of wanting to disappear while being unable to stop existing. Embarrassment is one of the most distinctive and most distinctively human experiences. Other animals experience fear. Other animals experience something that looks like joy. Other animals experience what appears to be grief and what appears to be affection and what appears to be rage. But no other animal blushes. No other animal covers its face with its hands. No other animal appears to experience the specific social pain of being seen doing something that violates the norms of its group and wishing that it had not been seen. The question of why human beings are the only animal that gets embarrassed, where this capacity came from, and what function it serves, turns out to illuminate something fundamental about what kind of social creatures human beings are, and about the relationship between social norms, self-consciousness, and the kind of cooperation that makes human civilization possible. Let's begin with what embarrassment actually is, as distinct from the emotions it is often confused with. The psychologist Dacher Keltner at the University of California, Berkeley, has spent decades studying what he calls the self-conscious emotions, a family of emotional states that includes embarrassment, shame, guilt, and pride. What distinguishes the self-conscious emotions from other emotions is that they all require a particular cognitive capacity, the ability to evaluate oneself from the perspective of others, to see oneself as an object of another person's perception and judgment. Embarrassment, in Keltner's analysis, is specifically a response to the sudden awareness that one has been seen doing something that violates a social norm, and that this violation has been witnessed by others whose opinion matters. It is not simply feeling bad. It is feeling bad about how you appear to specific other people who are present and watching. This is why embarrassment has such a distinctive set of behavioral expressions. When people are embarrassed, they look away from the observer. They touch their face, particularly the lower left side of the face, a gesture documented across cultures. They smile in a way that is different from a genuine smile, a smile with the corners pulled back and down rather than up. They turn their body partially away. The whole behavioral package communicates, in Keltner's account, something like, "I know I have violated a norm. I am aware that you have seen me violate it. I am not a threat, and I acknowledge that the violation was wrong." This behavioral signature is not simply a learned cultural response. Keltner and his colleagues conducted a study of individuals who were blind from birth, who had therefore never observed embarrassment in others and could not have learned it through imitation. When these individuals were embarrassed, they displayed the same pattern of behaviors as sighted people: the gaze aversion, the face touching, the particular smile. The behavioral expression of embarrassment is, at least in part, biologically prepared rather than purely culturally transmitted. Charles Darwin, in his 1872 work, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, was the first to subject embarrassment and blushing to serious scientific analysis. Darwin was struck by the universality of blushing across human cultures and by the fact that it seemed to serve no obvious biological function. Unlike other emotional expressions, which had clear adaptive uses, blushing seemed to do nothing useful. It revealed the emotional state of the person, but this revelation was precisely what the embarrassed person most wanted to conceal. Darwin's tentative conclusion was that blushing evolved as a signal of social awareness, a way of communicating to others that you are conscious of social norms and of the judgment of the group. The blush says, in effect, "I know what the rules are, I know I have broken them, and I care about what you think of me." This communication, Darwin suggested, might be socially useful even though it was uncomfortable for the individual, because it signaled to others that the person was a reliable participant in the social order. The evolutionary psychologist Mark Leary at Duke University has developed what he calls sociometer theory, which provides the most comprehensive evolutionary account of self-conscious emotions, including embarrassment. Sociometer theory begins with a question: what would evolutionary pressures select for in a highly social species that lived in groups in which reputation mattered enormously for survival and reproduction? The answer, Leary argues, is some form of monitoring system, a mechanism that tracked the individual's standing in the eyes of the group and produced emotional responses that motivated behavior to maintain or repair that standing. The sociometer is Leary's name for this system. It is, in his account, a psychological mechanism that continuously monitors cues in the social environment for evidence about how one is regarded by others and produces emotional states, including embarrassment, that motivate the individual to protect and manage their social reputation. On this account, embarrassment is not a malfunction or a social accident. It is the sociometer working exactly as designed. When you do something that threatens your social standing, the sociometer detects the threat and triggers the emotional state of embarrassment, which in turn motivates you to acknowledge the violation, to signal that you know the norms, and to take steps to repair your reputation with the group. The research on embarrassment and its social functions supports this account. Dacher Keltner and Brenda Major conducted a series of experiments in which they created situations designed to embarrass participants. In one study, participants were asked to perform a task in front of observers that inadvertently revealed something socially awkward. Those who displayed more pronounced embarrassment, as measured by observers rating their behavioral expressions, were subsequently liked more by the observers than those who appeared less embarrassed. The display of embarrassment signaled to observers that the person cared about social norms, which made them more likable and more trustworthy as potential social partners. This finding has been replicated in various forms. People who blush when they have done something wrong are judged as more trustworthy than people who do not blush. People who display embarrassment after a social faux pas are forgiven more quickly than people who appear indifferent to having committed one. The embarrassment signal, uncomfortable as it is for the person experiencing it, is socially functional. It lubricates social interaction by communicating something important. This person cares about the group and its norms. The philosopher of emotion June Price Tangney at George Mason University has spent decades studying the distinction between embarrassment, shame, and guilt, three emotions that are often conflated, but that have importantly different psychological structures and very different behavioral consequences. Embarrassment, in Tangney's analysis, is the mildest of the three. It is triggered by relatively minor social violations of norms of competence or propriety, and it produces the desire to hide or to escape the situation. But it does not typically produce a negative evaluation of the entire self. When you trip in public and everyone sees you, you are embarrassed, not ashamed. The embarrassment is about the specific incident, not about who you are. Shame is more severe. Shame is triggered by violations that feel like they reveal something fundamental and defective about the self. The person experiencing shame feels not just that they have done something bad, but that they are bad. Tangney and her colleagues have documented that shame, unlike embarrassment and guilt, is associated with destructive behavioral responses. Ashamed people are more likely to become angry, to hide, to deny, to externalize blame. Shame produces a desire to escape the self, and when escape is impossible, it can produce aggression. Guilt, unlike both embarrassment and shame, is focused on the specific behavior rather than on the self. The person experiencing guilt thinks, "I did a bad thing." They do not think, "I am a bad person." Tangney's research has found that guilt is associated with constructive behavioral responses. Guilty people are more likely to apologize, to make amends, to take steps to ensure they do not repeat the behavior. Guilt is, in Tangney's analysis, the morally productive emotion among the three. Understanding this distinction has practical implications. A society that primarily produces shame, rather than guilt, in response to norm violations will generate people who are less likely to take constructive steps to repair harm. Shaming as a social control mechanism produces defensiveness, concealment, and aggression rather than the apology and reparation that guilt tends to produce. The proliferation of public shaming in digital environments may be counterproductive precisely because shame, unlike guilt, does not motivate the behavioral changes it appears to demand. The neuroscience of embarrassment has added a further dimension to this understanding. Brain imaging studies have found that social pain, the pain of rejection, exclusion, and social failure, activates some of the same neural circuits as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in processing physical pain, is activated when people experience social rejection or exclusion in laboratory paradigms. The psychologist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA, who pioneered much of this research, has argued that the experience of social pain as physically painful is not a metaphor. The social pain system is, in evolutionary terms, built on top of the physical pain system, and it produces genuine suffering that has many of the same neurological features as the suffering produced by physical injury. This finding helps explain why social failure and the threat to reputation produce such intense distress. Embarrassment, at its most acute, is not just uncomfortable. It genuinely hurts, in a neurologically meaningful sense. The pain of embarrassment is the social pain system signaling that something important has gone wrong in the individual's relationship with the group. The cross-cultural evidence on embarrassment and the self-conscious emotions is particularly interesting. While the capacity for embarrassment appears to be universal, the specific situations that trigger it vary considerably across cultures. What counts as a norm violation, and therefore what triggers the sociometer response, is shaped by the particular norms of the cultural context. In cultures that emphasize individual autonomy and personal achievement, embarrassment is most commonly triggered by personal failures that are visible to others, by incompetence, by awkwardness, by being caught doing something that reveals a deficit in the individual. In cultures that emphasize collective identity and group harmony, embarrassment is also commonly triggered by situations in which one's group is seen to violate norms, by what is sometimes called vicarious embarrassment, or embarrassment on behalf of another. The anthropologist Ruth Benedict's classic distinction between shame cultures and guilt cultures, developed in her 1946 work, The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, was an early attempt to map these cultural differences, though the categories have since been refined and critiqued. The basic observation that cultures differ in the degree to which they rely on shame versus guilt as mechanisms of social control is well established, even if the original framing was too binary. What the cross-cultural evidence suggests is that the capacity for embarrassment and the self-conscious emotions is a universal feature of human psychology, but the specific content of what triggers these emotions is shaped by the cultural context in which the individual develops. The sociometer is a universal mechanism, but it is calibrated by the particular norms of the particular group. The question of why no other animal appears to experience embarrassment connects to a broader question about what cognitive capacities are required for embarrassment to be possible. The answer illuminates something fundamental about the uniqueness of human social cognition. Embarrassment requires at minimum the ability to represent what other people think about you, what is sometimes called theory of mind or mentalizing. The ability to evaluate your own behavior against a standard of appropriate conduct, and the capacity to feel pain when that evaluation reveals a discrepancy between your behavior and the standard. These capacities, particularly the ability to represent and reason about the mental states of others, appear to be significantly more developed in humans than in any other species. Great apes show some evidence of theory of mind, but the evidence for the sophisticated recursive mentalizing that embarrassment requires, the ability to think about what someone else is thinking about what you are doing, is much weaker in other species than in humans. The philosopher Charles Taylor argued in his landmark 1989 work Sources of the Self that the capacity for what he called strong evaluation, the ability to evaluate one's own desires and behaviors against standards that one regards as genuinely important, is one of the distinctive features of human personhood. Embarrassment is the emotional marker of strong evaluation in action. When you are embarrassed, you are not simply reacting to a situation. You are evaluating your own conduct against a standard of appropriate behavior and experiencing distress because the evaluation reveals a gap. This is why embarrassment is so intimately connected to identity. To be embarrassed is to care about how you appear to others, and to care about how you appear to others is to have a social identity, a sense of yourself as a person who exists in relation to a community whose judgment matters. The sociologist Erving Goffman, in his landmark 1956 paper Embarrassment and Social Organization, argued that embarrassment is not simply an individual psychological state, but a social phenomenon that plays a crucial role in maintaining the rules of social interaction. When someone is embarrassed, The other people present typically try to help them recover their composure. They look away, they change the subject, they make a joke. This collective management of embarrassment is, Goffman argued, evidence of how deeply committed social actors are to maintaining the fiction of smooth social interaction, the shared pretense that everyone is performing their social roles competently. Embarrassment reveals the hidden structure of social life. It shows us that social interaction is not simply the natural result of people being together. It is a performance, and it requires effort and skill to maintain. When the performance breaks down, embarrassment marks the breakdown, and the collective effort to repair it reveals how much everyone present is invested in maintaining it. You are the only kind of creature that experiences this, not because you are weak or socially anxious or more fragile than other animals, but because you are the kind of creature that has a social identity that exists in relation to a community of others whose judgment matters to you, and that has the cognitive machinery to evaluate your own conduct against the standards that community holds. Embarrassment is the price of belonging, and belonging, it turns out, is what you are built for.